Hello, I'm Lana. I'm here to give my testimony of how Jesus brought me out of occult practices and New Age deceptive spirituality into a personal and fulfilling relationship with Him alone. I was born to believing parents, and I've always myself believed in God. We only have to look at the world around us to know there's a great creator. When I was about 18 months old, my mum had a healing from terminal cancer by the Lord. She was prayed for, people were fasting and praying for her full recovery, and God in His mercy granted a miracle, and she was totally healed of cancer. So I went to Sunday school at the age of around 9, and I went for many years, so I had a good grounding in Christianity, the life of Jesus. At around the same time that I started going to Sunday school, I became very interested in the occult, and there was a comic that came out called Misty around this time. It was 1978 when it was launched, and it was a supernatural girls comic with creepy tales. The comic also gave away free gifts to do with astrology, divination, talismans, good luck charms, that sort of thing. And I was hooked on this comic. Every Wednesday, I couldn't wait to go and rush and buy it. I'd also write ghost stories at school. I was obsessed with reading horror books, watching creepy things on TV. I had a real pull to that dark side, and I think I liked terrifying myself. One day when I was around 10, I was sitting in the back of my parents' car in between my brother and a friend, and I discovered the power of the mind a bit, and because I said to my friends, wouldn't it be awful if the car was to roll backwards right now with us in it? To our horror, it happened. The car started rolling backwards and we were screaming and shouting, and my friend pulled on the handbrake, so no damage was done, and my father rushed out of the house at that moment. The term for this is telekinesis, and I'd made something happen with my mind, and that had always stuck with me as being a very strange, creepy thing to happen. When I was 15, a school friend asked me if I wanted to go to her home when her parents were out to play on a Ouija board. And I jumped at the chance. No one else wanted to go, just me. I shot down there and we had this very strange session. At first I thought my friend was pushing the glass around the letters to spell out words. But then I could see she wasn't. It would have been just too difficult. It was targeting me. Whatever spirit behind this board that had come upon us was targeting me and saying it was going to kill me, I'm a bad person, and all these sorts of things. Now, you would think this would put me off, but sadly it didn't. It just made me more interested. I made my own board out of some wood, and I used to do the Ouija board at school with friends, using a pencil sharpener as a planchette on the board. I found I couldn't use it on my own. From what was explained to me, it needed energy of more than one person. But it was also, again, frightening me, but still I was doing it. And it was a pull, it was a real obsession with it, and I was doing it a lot every day. One day at home, my parents were out, and I remember sitting at the dining room table, feeling so frightened and so oppressed. I took off the ring off my hand, which I'd been using as a planchette on this board to move around the letters, and I took the ring off and I put it on the table, and I just felt really, really frightened. And I didn't do it again after that. A friend of mine came and took the board from me and burnt it in her back garden, and that was the end of that. But unfortunately, it didn't diminish my interest in the occult. I was still reading books about people using Ouija boards and things like that. There still was a draw there for me. My parents found out I'd been using a Ouija board because at this time in the 80s, they'd become born-again Christians, and they were getting things out of their home which they realised had no place in a Christian home. So when I was 15, I studied RE for one of my O-level qualifications, and I studied Matthew, Mark and Luke. So together with my Sunday school education, I was also learning more and more about Jesus. So I had the gospel knowledge and I passed the exam. In my 20s, I became a Roman Catholic in order to marry one, and I was given Catholic instruction by a nun, and every week I would take my Bible, which I had from Sunday school, Now this is the Bible I'd saved up for week by week, 20 pence at a time or so. And I really like it. It's got lots of pictures in it. There's Jonah going headfirst into a big fish. This Bible's great, and I'd always had it on my shelf, but never really read it, just little parts of it. When I went to the nun to have Catholic instruction in order to become a Catholic, I used to take this Bible, and not once did we open this Bible, because these lessons were just about the catechism. The nun who was teaching me said the Bible is full of fillers, and we're not to hold that much store by it. So I'd go to Catholic church every week. It was a tick in the box, ritualistic experience. I went week by week. I never prayed or thought about God outside of going to church. I only ever called on God in prayer when I was in some form of dire straits or bother, and that was it. So in my 20s, I was still involved in occult books, horror films. I was a really superstitious person as well. I was listening to all wives' tales and thinking all manner of bad luck would come upon me if I put an umbrella up in the house, put new shoes on a table, walked under a ladder, anything like that. I was quite obsessed with those things, and I didn't like it being Friday the 13th. And I also had a few psychic experiences of my own around this time. I knew things that were going to happen. Not regularly, but I did have psychic experiences throughout my 20s. It was in my 30s that I really got interested in New Age spirituality. And this is because I was really interested in health. I'd become a vegetarian at 19 or so, and I got very interested in nutrition and general well-being. And one day I decided to go and have a colonic irrigation. I thought, I'll have a detox. This treatment sounds good for me, and it was getting good reviews. So I went along and I had this treatment. And as I was having the treatment, the practitioner lady, we got into conversation. She said to me, you might want to go and see, and she mentioned a lady who was quite psychic. She said, you'd really benefit from an appointment with this contact. So I went along to see this lady. She did a technique called the metamorphic technique, which is a little known technique. It involves manipulation of the feet. Massaged my feet, worked on my feet, but at the same time, she told me so much about myself. She seemed to know my insecurities, she knew about my family, she knew what was going on in my life, and I was just blown away that she'd know all this stuff about me. And I'd never met her before. I was that amazed at what she told me, and she really hit a nerve in my emotions, and I just burst out crying during this treatment, and then I fell asleep, and then I woke up thinking, that was amazing, that was so good. How can I know more? And that is really what's got me into researching New Age spirituality. And then I would go to Mind, Body, Spirit festivals in London. I went to them regularly. I just couldn't get enough of it. I just became hooked in this world, which I now know is all deceitful, but it's packaged so well and so in a self-help realm. I had so much interest in New Age modalities and subjects. I was so interested in just about everything. So I either experienced it myself or I'd heard about it. And to give an outline of what I was interested in on a daily basis, I've made a note of my top 10 New Age practices that I lived and breathed. I also wrote a holistic blog, a New Age blog. I even wrote a book introducing people to New Age spirituality. I was just so heavily involved, and I just lived my life by these principles. The main practice I was involved in was Reiki. I did it in total for over 12 years. I became a Reiki master. So I was leading many people astray through Reiki. Now, Reiki is a hands-on healing treatment known as universal energy. The practitioner is the conduit for this universal healing energy that can only do good. It goes where it needs to go. It heals mind, body, spirit. And I got very heavily involved in that. And you need an initiation ritual in order to undertake Reiki. You can't just learn it from a book and learn it from someone else. You have to be what's called attuned through demonic symbols that open up your psychic channels. Meditation was something I did on a daily basis. I did this to deepen my psychic ability, because when I'd gone to learn Reiki, I became very psychic, more or less overnight, and that shocked me. Lots of things happened to me that just blew me away. I knew things I shouldn't have known. I thought I was helping people because I could see their inner struggles, their turmoils. I was able to help them. Also, I thought I was using it for relaxation, but more, I wanted to be even more psychic because I thought this was fantastic. And I was doing it with crystals. I would just sit there spacing out in my living room in the morning, in the evening, chanting sometimes, sitting in certain postures. I got into yoga way earlier than Reiki. I'd done it for a long time because I found a book for 50 pence when I was on holiday one day, and I thought, this looks interesting. The exercises don't look too difficult. So I started doing beginner's yoga, and then I progressed. And yoga was something I thought to teach down the line because I was that interested in it, particularly with the Kundalini form of yoga. So I did it for many years, which now I know are bowing down to pagan deities. Feng Shui was a big part of my life. And again, this was way before Reiki. I'd been interested in this. I've always been an organised person, a neat person, and it kind of fitted into my personality. And I trained to be a Feng Shui practitioner, so I took 2 years and learned how to do this. Feng Shui is the art of placement of items within your home in order to gain good luck, prosperity, abundance, whether it's in your job, your income, in your relationships. So my house was what you would call feng shuied, and it was all about abundance, all about bringing in the best of what you could get in your life. So I lived with these principles for many years, and I went to other people's houses. I feng shuied their homes too. Signs and synchronicities. I was obsessed with signs, with thinking they were guiding me somewhere. I would see coincidences, which I didn't believe in as coincidences. I saw them all as synchronistic ways of leading me in my life. And also numbers, such as 111, 1111. If I saw these numbers, I would see it as a sign from heaven that the angels were blessing me, that something great's about to happen, or that I'm doing well in their eyes. So everything was about signs, everything was about synchronicities. And I used to have a lot of lucid, clear dreams that would guide my life, help me make decisions, see what the best course of action was for me in various elements of my life. So I was obsessed with dreams, and I would write them all down, had many volumes of dream journals. I love tarot cards and angel cards, and again, when I had a life decision to think about, I would run to get my cards. It was the first thing I did. If I didn't have time to meditate, I'd run and get a card. One time I even fell up my stairs on my face, rushing to go and get a deck of cards to get an answer to a question. And I would read cards with people. And in my mind, I was helping them find a path forwards in any of their stumbling blocks. I would call on angels all the time, who I thought were benevolent beings, out to love me and to prosper me and take care of me. While I didn't have a deceased spirit guide as such, I didn't work like that. I worked with what I thought were angels of God. For any life guidance, I'd be asking on angels. If I was going into a daunting situation, if I was having a minor medical procedure, I would call on angels to help me and to calm me and to keep me safe. Crystals, I was big on crystals. I had so many crystals in my house. Now, we know God has made crystals, and they are beautiful objects from the earth, and they're very pretty. But in the New Age, people use them for divination, for healing, for rituals. I was always looking at the moon cycles to see how best to utilise my crystals, drawing in this power, whatever I needed at the time. I would carry crystals around in my bag for good fortune, for good communication skills, things like that. And positive affirmations and the law of attraction. So the law of attraction was made very popular in recent times, even into mainstream business. I went on a corporate course and they were talking about the law of attraction. And the law of attraction is basically you speak things into existence, making yourself godlike, really. That whatever you say, you're going to attract in. And mind your words, because whatever negativity you'll speak, you'll bring it on yourself. So it's a very exhausting way to live, of watching every word, watching every thought, because if something bad happens, well, it's all your fault. So every day I would use a lot of positive affirmations while I was getting ready in the bathroom in the morning, just to pep myself up, tell myself how wonderful I am, what great things I'm attracting into my life. And off I'd go with a spring in my step, thinking I was sorted for the day. Within all these practices, I was just constantly looking for meaning, looking to deepen my spirituality, looking to be a better person, and looking to help other people with the things that I'd learned. Because I've always been a helper. I think it's in my nature to be a helper. This is why I went into holistic therapy. Whilst I was doing Reiki with people, I was very vigilant about psychic protection, to protect myself, to protect my clients while I was working with them from any evil entities that may be lurking around while we're doing this spiritual work. Now, I know this is ridiculous now, because there's no way a demon can protect you from another demon, and it is all the demonic realm. Whilst I believed myself to be quite happy in the New Age because it felt good, it felt uplifting to me, because I was helping myself, I was helping other people, or so I thought, I was never actually fulfilled. Because in the New Age, you always want more. You always want to try out a new workshop. You want to buy more oracle cards. Their creators bring out them all the time. It's the money-making scheme. So you're never truly fulfilled in your heart and mind and soul, because you are constantly seeking for the next big thing in the spiritual world. I loved it when people gave me great feedback. I'd put their testimonies straight up on my website. It was egotistical, really. I thought I was helping them break through their difficulties and give them readings, give them hope for their future, and tell them things that were going to happen. I class myself as a light worker, which is what a lot of New Agers call themselves, that we work with the light, which I didn't know at the time is actually darkness, because it's such a deception to fool good and well-meaning people who just want to help their clients and better themselves. I actually thought God was happy with me whilst I was in an occultic lifestyle, because one weekend I was in Glastonbury, which is a very New Age town in England. After I'd had Reiki in Glastonbury, I went to sleep and I had such a lucid dream that I was floating around and I could see a sign in the distance, and I floated my body over to this sign in the dream, and it said very clearly, God smiles upon you. Now, I know that was demonic, to keep me away from God, to just keep me in the darkness that I was in. I truly believed I was going to heaven after my death, because I saw myself as a good person. So I had no fear of death. Yet I was doing everything against God at that time, which I didn't have a clue about, because it felt pure and it felt right and it felt wholesome. I never once challenged my beliefs, never once. I thought I was in a good place because of the hours I was putting into meditation and learning. I thought I was constantly evolving, in truth. But I was veiled. I was in darkness, and Satan veils people. Satan makes the world of New Age spirituality feel so good, so positive, so empowering, that you don't question it, because you think, this is so right. I'm on the right path. I'm good to go. But the light that you believe you're in is counterfeit. So in my 40s, I got divorced and remarried. I didn't go to Catholic church anymore. I still went to other churches on and off. I had a real issue with being told I was a sinner during a sermon, and I didn't like that at all. I didn't like being told I was a sinner, and I used to really get quite annoyed at that. And I remember there was a hymn in one of the church services which we had to sing, I'm a sinner. And when it came to that line, which I could see it coming on the board, I zipped up my mouth and I wouldn't sing that line. And amazing now, really, because of course I'm a sinner. God said we're all sinners. We've all fallen short of his glory. One of the reasons why I didn't like being told I was a sinner is because I used to follow a New Age teacher called Louise Hay. And in one of her books, she said, if any organisation says to you you're a sinner, run away from them. So I had that stuck in my mind. So towards the end of my Reiki days, I started to say the Lord's Prayer over my clients. I don't know why I started to do this. They didn't know I was saying it over them. It was all silently. While I was in their energy fields, I wanted them to be happy and healthy and healed. And so I started bringing Jesus into New Age healing, not knowing at the time you cannot mix the two. You cannot mix darkness with light. So shortly after I started bringing in the Lord's Prayer into my Reiki sessions, I can't explain this, but I started to feel really uncomfortable about my spiritual life. I couldn't explain it. I felt uneasy, and it made me question, should I just stop doing Reiki? I don't know why. Should I just stop doing it? So one day in the summer of 2017, I asked God, is Jesus the only way to you? Because I'd heard this, but I didn't know what to make of it. I didn't really believe it, because I thought as long as you were a good person and I believed in Jesus, I was fine. But I learnt since that that's not enough, because even the devil believes in Jesus and trembles. So believing in Jesus alone is not enough to get you saved. So I asked God this question, is Jesus the only way? And very shortly afterwards, instead of doing yoga in the mornings, I felt drawn to go back to my Bible and start reading this book in the mornings instead of doing my usual yoga practice. Just to say here at this point, I had been told that the Bible was corrupted, that it wasn't all true. Bits of it are fine, but that there was a lot of psychic talk in the Bible that had been taken out to dumb down people. Now, I'd heard this in New Age and I didn't question it. I just ran with that idea. So for me to start reading the Bible every morning was a bit of a big deal. Just a week or so after this, I asked God again. I said, if Jesus is the only way, please show me a sign this weekend. And the sign I wanted was a picture of Jesus. I remember clearly saying to God that if you show me this sign, I will follow him alone. God met me where I was at with all my signs and synchronicity obsession in life. And at 4 o'clock on the Sunday of that weekend, I saw a picture of Jesus. And it was quite a small picture. It was about so big in a frame. It's called The Crucifixion and it's by William Blake. It's a very old painting. I just stood there staring at this picture, and really I wasn't surprised. It's like I knew God was going to show me. It's like I already knew the path I should be on, and I wanted that confirmation, and God gave me that confirmation, and I stood there staring at it. I took a photograph of it. So all of a sudden I was a brand new Christian and I didn't really know what to do. I didn't know anyone who had come out of New Age to Christ. So I didn't have anyone to talk to. I read a Christian book, but when I think about it now, it was a New Age Christian book. There's a lot of New Age mixed in with Christianity, sadly. And the book I picked up, I thought, this is great. And it was almost like home from home for me. So I was reading it thinking, this is fantastic. But now I realised that wasn't a godly book. And also what I did at this time, I lay on my therapy couch, I put crystals on my chakras, which are the energy centres, and did a healing and a meditation. But while I lay there, I was saying to God, is this okay to do this? Feels good? And that night, God showed me in a dream that it was such a wicked thing to do. It was so unholy. So God took me through a process of sanctification. I was led by God to get rid of all the witchcraft items in my home, all the books, all the tarot cards, all the room cleansing tools, pyramids, the artwork I had, the symbols I had, everything, even things I'd forgotten about that were up in my attic. God, when I went up there for a different purpose, led me to a certain box and I was able to get rid of more stuff. I was horrified at just how much I'd gone against God. I was horrified that I had known who Jesus was and what he did, but had ignored him. I thought I had him in my life, but he was in the background. He wasn't in the forefront of my life. And Jesus had waited for me all this time with his patience, no matter what I'd done, no matter what I'd been involved in. And I repented of all my witchcraft, everything I'd done. And not just my witchcraft, all my other sins that I'd done as well. Breaking his commandments, just living a very unholy life. But by the world's standards, I look like a good person. But God's standards are very high. Jesus gave me a new heart. I became born again, which is a complete spiritual renewal, whereby the Holy Spirit dwells within you and will guide you in all things. He will convict you. He will comfort you. He led me to a sound church where I can grow and fellowship with other people and have good teaching. The moment I gave my life to Jesus, everything changed for me. I used to have a lot of spirit voices in my head talking to me, giving me information, or just I would feel like I was overhearing spirits having a conversation, many things like that. And that stopped overnight. I lost my love of horror films and occult. I have no desire to watch those things, read about those things anymore. However, what happens is when you come to Jesus, there's a spiritual warfare going on. So all these angelic beings that I used to talk to and call on for help turned on me. I thought they were my helpful friends, that they loved me, that they had my best interests at heart. But in truth, they hated me. And once I came to Jesus, the truth, the only true spiritual path there is, they turned on me with such viciousness, and they attacked me while I was vulnerable, which is when I was asleep, through horrific nightmares, sleep paralysis, really frightening me. And it was a scary time, but I would call on Jesus, and the second I called on Jesus, even when I was asleep, I would call on Jesus. My soul would cry for God, and I would wake up, and I would be out of that dream, out of that horrible, horrible battle. The worst spiritual warfare for me was the day I got baptised, and the baptism was a fantastic experience. My father baptised me in the sea. It was wonderful. It was a really memorable morning, and on that evening I was so spiritually attacked, really badly, to the point I was physically sick, and I am rarely ill. I was so sick. I had no sleep all night. I was tormented by demons saying, put Reiki hands on yourself, you know you can heal yourself, you know you can feel better and you'll get straight off to sleep. Because I'd self-healed with Reiki many times, soothed myself, gone to sleep very quickly. And it was my go-to. Laying the hands on myself was my go-to method. So the night I got baptised and was so ill, and I fought it, I called on Jesus, and he protected me through this. One day I asked God, why did I get into the occult like I did so much when none of my family were into the occults? God showed me an image of a picture that had come into my childhood bedroom that had been cursed, and in witchcraft this is called the law of contagion, and it had led me into the occult. And the reason why I'm sharing this part is for Christian parents out there watching to please pray over your child, over your child's belongings in their bedrooms, because we don't always know what's coming in. I also found out why later on, when I came to Jesus, why I started to feel uncomfortable about my spiritual lifestyle. And it's because at around the same time, a man I don't know, who was a friend of my parents who they hadn't seen in over 20 years actually, God woke this man up in the middle of the night and put me on his heart to urgently pray for me. And this man couldn't even remember my name, but God gave him my name a little later, and he urgently called him to pray for me. So this man later on, who hadn't seen my parents in over 20 years, came to their house, and it just so happened it was after the weekend of my baptism, and shared what God had given him a couple of years previously. And of course there was joy all around, because he didn't know what was going on in my life, but he just knew he had to pray for me at that time. The New Age is nothing but witchcraft, because it's all about manipulating energy to get what you want. It's a very self-centered way of life. Satan is behind it all, to deceive people, to make you feel good, to make you feel like you're on the right path. And he deceives well-meaning people into a life of darkness which masquerades itself as light. But it's all lies. All these lies started back in the Garden of Eden, where Satan tempted Eve and cunningly got her to eat the forbidden fruit, because he said to her, if you eat this forbidden fruit, you will be like God. You will have knowledge, you will know all things. They want to be like God themselves. Satan wanted Eve to disobey God, as he does with everybody in this world, so we don't know the truth. And this is the huge deception, and people should not underestimate the intelligence of Satan. Now, I used to think, why do Christians always speak about Satan? And now I understand it's a spiritual war, and you've got to be on your guard. You've got to be very tight with Jesus. Jesus said, I am the way, the truth, and the life, and no one comes to the Father except through me. And that's in John 14:6. And that is a huge message, because Jesus is God come in the flesh. Jesus took on a horrendous death for our sins. And while I knew this, I didn't really grasp the enormity of it until I actually came to be a Christian. As the old hymn says, I scarce can take it in. I can't take it in just what Jesus went through because of his love for humankind. I was and still am overwhelmed what Jesus has done for me and for the world. We are all God's creation, but we're not all his children. And in order to be his children, we need to be adopted into his family through repentance and through receiving Jesus as our Lord and Saviour. I give daily thanks and praise to God for saving me, for pulling me out of darkness into his light. I'm so happy now to be part of the Lord's family and to have a personal relationship with him and be in his word daily. Thank you so much for listening today.